Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. Tonight is January 4th, 2024. I'm Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is the vice chair, Amelia Aboff, the clerk, Jahan Habib, and members Michael McNeely, Luke Schuster, and Debbie Howard Easton. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Somerville Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. A video recording of these proceedings will be available on the city website or by emailing planning@somervillema.gov. We have another number of items on our agenda tonight. The first one actually is a request by the applicant of 45 Mystic Avenue, who has previously been opened and heard, to continue that application to the meeting on February 1st, 2024. Chair moves to continue that agenda item to February 1st, seconded by Amelia. Risa, if you can call the roll.
This is Risa speaking. Michael Capuano.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Okay, the agenda item is continued to 1. We also have other agenda items that are not cases, that is all mostly administrative. We also have 2 recommendations to the city council following a joint hearing of the planning board and land use committee a few weeks ago. We have had that joint hearing. We have taken testimony at that joint hearing. We left the written comment period open to, I believe, a few weeks ago at noon. So I'd actually like to take those up first, because we do have staff here that might be able to answer the questions that anybody has on these 2 agenda items. For the benefit of anybody in the audience and the members of the board, the 2 agenda items on which we'll have to take recommendations, make recommendations, is Councilor Pineda Neufeld proposing amending section 7.2.7 of the ordinances to add shared workspace and arts education to table 7.2.7 permitted uses. And we also have a request by Charles Zamudo requesting the adoption of an amendment to the zoning ordinance map to change the zoning district of 563 to 565 Broadway from urban residence to mid-rise 4. So let's take up the Ward 7 Council's proposed amendment first. We took testimony and had a presentation on effectively what this would mean, and I'm wondering if someone from staff can just do a very quick background. It's don't do a presentation. We've heard the presentation, but as a reminder, I think this is specific to the Powder House School site, and just adding one use to some of the facilities that it has there.
So I'm Madison Anthony, and I can go ahead and give you a very brief background about this amendment. I'm sure you know that this special district was added a few years ago, and now Councilor Neufeld wants to introduce a shared workspace and arts education use to the district. It wasn't originally added because the developer just didn't originally consider it, but there's since been some interest from businesses to add this type of business to the area, and there's already a few arts uses allowed in the district, and this would just be a similar arts addition.
It seems pretty straightforward, and it's my understanding that staff supports the amendment.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments or questions or concerns about this proposed amendment? Okay. Yep, Amelia.
Mr. Chair, I think I noted this in the joint hearing, but this for staff's consideration. Like, I'm on board with the content of this amendment, but in reviewing it against if we were to ever revisit some of the use categories more broadly, this piece of nomenclature is very unclear, I think, to would-be users. And if we ever are taking another look at some of the language that we're using, the distinction between a co-working space and an arts and shared space here is, I'm grateful that staff clarified at the previous meeting, but definitely something we should probably improve on in a future iteration someday.
Noted. And to the extent that we would have any proposals specifically from the planning board in particular forms in the coming year to be able to effectuate those changes, that would obviously be welcome. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, the chair moves to recommend adoption of the amendment proposed by Councilor Pineda Newfeld, seconded by recommend for adoption to the Land Use Committee. Seconded by Amelia. Raisa, can you please call the roll?
This is Raisa speaking. Michael Capuano,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Okay.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Planning board has recommended adoption of that. The next one is Charles Zamudo, looking to rezone 563 to 565 Broadway from UR to MR4. Effectively, this is the old Sons of Italy, right? And we're looking to add I think like a restaurant use to the space that for a long time was a function hall anyway. I see nothing opposed to this. That whole block has uses similar to the ground use commercial that they're trying to do here, and I see no reason why I wouldn't look to have a contiguous block of similar type businesses. Anybody have any comments or questions or concerns about this amendment, requested amendment? Okay, Michael. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can anyone from staff provide any context as to why we didn't have this as an MR4 use originally?
This is Raisa speaking. I don't know specifically the answer to that question, but this is being requested by the petitioner. So this is why it's now being brought forward. I don't really have any other answer for that particular question.
Okay, yeah, I think my question was just that it looks like it kind of fits into place, so I was surprised that we didn't originally have it as MR4. So if there was a good reason not to, obviously that would be helpful context.
I'm actually wondering. I don't know. I'm actually wondering if some of that development on that block hadn't occurred when we made the original zoning.
Okay.
Like they totally built that premier building and all of that. I don't remember exactly when that was, whether that predated or postdated the zoning code. So,
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, the chair moves to recommend to the Land Use Committee adoption of this proposed zoning amendment, seconded by Amelia. Raisa, can you please call the roll?
This is Raisa speaking. Michael Capuano.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
This item has been unanimously recommended to the Land Use Committee for adoption. RPP amendments. I think Raisa, is this you?
Yes, this is Raisa speaking. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the amendments proposed by staff to the RPP. I will let the board ask any questions and answer.
My question is something that you and I spoke about earlier. Most of these, if not all of these proposed changes, are things that were included in in the RPP, but we're actually inconsistent with what the zoning ordinance requires. And so this is a way to make sure that our policies and procedures actually align with what the ordinance allows. Is that an accurate way to portray these changes?
This is Raisa speaking. That is correct. Although we are adding the sixth applicability under minor site plan approvals, which allows for the modification of parking lots limited only to zoning compliant pavement parking, pavement markings, and zoning compliant landscaping changes as a minor site plan approval. And we're adding this because we've recently been getting a lot of applications that would require such a small scope of work to go through the entire site plan approval process, with neighborhood meeting, design review, neighborhood meeting 2. So this is why that's being added, but everything else is more clarification or adding something that was already written in the zoning ordinance specifically. For example, the planning board's rules of the title, it should have been procedure and policy. And that's how the zoning ordinance refers to it. However, I think last year in the creation of this document, somehow that was staff's error and we switched the word. So it went from procedure and policy to policy and procedure. So very minimal changes are being requested.
Makes sense. And pretty straightforward. I see Luke's hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any concerns about those proposed amendments. So I'm happy to pause on this, but I read the document much more closely this time around than I think that was like the first meeting that Member McNeely and I were on back in March or something. We had the last round of this, and I just, with 9 months under my belt now, have many more better informed thoughts about how we do things. And anyhow, so I'm just wondering if this is the moment, this meeting, some point to just share thoughts, or some of them are thoughts about ways we might change our policies. Some are more about practices rather than just the formal policies, but there's a little bit of gray area between, or not gray area, but policy is related to practice in terms of how we run our meetings. So that's the preamble, but is this the meeting to raise some of those or not?
So Luke, I mean, the answer is yes. The only concern that I have is kind of without knowing what some of the thoughts and concerns are first. I'm not sure I'm ready to discuss kind of in detail. Because we can amend our rules and regs anytime we want. We just happen to do it kind of at this first meeting as an other business piece. But if you have some ideas and concerns that we might want to talk about kind of in more detail once we've kind of thought about what some of the issues that you've identified are, I'm happy to bring them up maybe in another meeting when we've had some time to think about it.
Yeah, so I'm eager to follow your lead. I mean, I can raise the thoughts so people hear them, but with no expectation that we'd vote on, if any of them led to an amendment right now, or yeah. I can, raise them some other way. Yeah.
No. I mean, if just for me, I'm always one that wants to think about the way these things go before I think about a vote or a constructive way of handling it. But I'm certainly happy to hear some of your thoughts so the board can kind of think about them over the next period of time and raise them in a more formal way, maybe in 2 weeks or whenever it might be appropriate on the agenda.
Okay, that's great. So, and I'm looking at my list. So I think 2 of them are really directly about specifics in the policy and procedures document. And then a couple are not really that. And it's about practices we've adopted about how we do our meetings. So let me do the first kind of 2 X's and O ones about the policies first. The first is, it's always seemed slightly odd to me that we segregate within public testimony people who are testifying in support versus people testifying in opposition. And I'd be open to I'd love people to feel welcome to share mixed feelings about a project and not have to kind of slot into the binary they like it or not. So one idea was just eliminating that distinction and just inviting people to testify with any thoughts they've got.
So I said I was going to wait on them, but I think this actually requires a more technical response that maybe I can give as to why we do it that way. One, I'm pretty sure that the general rules of open meeting law require that type of a breakdown. But two, as a more practical way, when staff compiles meeting minutes, and a way to track what is said at a particular meeting, it usually helps to have similar testimony grouped together, so they're not kind of bouncing back and forth. So if we know that the minutes 5 through 20 of a tape are all people speaking in support, it's generally easier that way, and similar to people that express opposition. So as a logistical way, that's why we and I believe all bodies do it that way. Secondly, there used to be, and we changed it a number of years ago, speaking in support or speaking in opposition. And we on the board changed the opposition to kind of express concern or questions. So it's people who wanted to be kind of enthusiastic, and then everybody else who either didn't like the project or had some more complicated ideas. But if it makes sense to maybe break it down to people who don't have an opinion either way, as kind of option 3, that's certainly something that I think we can talk about. I just want to make sure that what we do and the way we take testimony is compliant with open meeting law standards.
That's helpful. I feel like other public bodies don't necessarily do this split in Massachusetts, but maybe it's specific to the type of body we are. Either way, the thing about the notes also, may well be a good reason to keep it as is. I was scanning back the policy language, and is it support and opposition literally in our policy? Because if it is, one consideration could be keeping support but revising opposition back to the opposition or other thoughts, something like you said. And that could just be still 2 categories, but subtly acknowledging to the public that we don't expect you to fully be voting yay or nay in the moment you stand up and speak.
I can just add, I appreciate the clarification on the topic around this, because certainly in the handful of meetings that I have chaired, I think I've used the expression in favor or in opposition because that is the default that I've heard most frequently. And I had not given thought to the nuance of sort of alternative framing of that. So whatever we decide, I think it's nice to have it revisited to make sure that we're being inclusive.
I just would appreciate if staff could check in to make sure that we're not obligated to take testimony in a particular fashion, to comply with state law or the way our code is written. I'm always happy to think about creative ways to make sure that people don't feel like they have to be all in or all out, because there's almost nothing that I've ever voted on that I'm all in or all out on. So.
This is Raisa speaking. If I can add through you, Mr. Chair. In the past, this has been the set procedure for how we take public testimony. I can do some research to see if we can change that language. But at this time, to the best of my knowledge, it is how we have operated in the planning board thus far. But I can definitely look into it.
I appreciate that. Sounds great to me. I'll move to the second thing. Is that good?
Sure.
And by the way, something you said on my first point, Mr. Chair, kind of is important to stress that I get this, which is there may be some things we do that from our individual perspective might not seem perfect, but are constrained by state law or something. So, and that really may be the case here. So, this relates to required vote thresholds for something to pass. And if I'm reading,
That is set by state law.
okay, so maybe that this is just going to answer it, but since I'm raising, I just to indulge, if you don't mind, and sort of settle my understanding of this, it would be helpful. In a sense, we have a supermajority threshold on most votes because the required number of votes for something to pass, it needs to be equal to or greater than the quorum requirement, and that is directed by state law. Yeah, I see you nodding. So
I know I had this discussion with someone a few years ago. Might have been Proacus, a few years ago when the planning board was really missing a bunch of members. Right, we always had like 4 people, and if we didn't have 4 people, we couldn't have a meeting. Then we started adding some alternates, and the people came, some people left. So I laid out. I don't remember the answer. I said, how many people do we need to pass different types of permits that we can approve? And it varies based on whether it's a special permit, whether it's site plan approval, whether it's a multiple type of votes that we take on how many votes, how many are required to be a quorum for different types of votes. And based on that number is also derivative of how many votes in support something has to get. So that's something that is something we can't change. And I don't remember the exact numbers on which vote requires what, but it's usually a quorum of 4 and in certain votes you actually require 4 votes. So you would need a unanimous decision if there were only 4 members present. And I think that might be for special permit with site plan review. But that's why it's done that way. It's we're obligated to have certain people vote in the affirmative. And in some cases, it's an actual number of members of the board, irrespective of whether there are less than a full board that's present, right? So if you have 4 people that are in a meeting, on some cases, you have to have a unanimous vote because the law requires 4 votes in support. So, and I just, I don't remember exactly which one is which, but we absolutely have that information someplace.
yeah, and I have it in front of me actually, just because this was in my notes. So you got it right on special permit and master plan. Special permits is a 4 votes. Well, sorry, 4 is the quorum, and then that relates to the votes you need for something to pass, and then it's 3 for administrative permits and all administrative matters.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that just settles that. So thank you. The other 2 things I have on my list are just about meeting practices we've adopted. But New Year, reflecting on things, is it okay if I raise these 2?
Yeah, of course.
So the first is about our use of our sort of expectations and use of turning on the camera during Zoom meetings. Now that we're continuing to be remote indefinitely. And I guess what's on my mind is 2 things. Just saying out loud as a team, confirming what our shared expectations are, and maybe considering some tweaks for how we ask different participants in our meetings to turn on cameras or not. And so I just would want us to be sensitive across the board on all this, but I can jump into my thoughts, but I don't know if you want to jump in before I do that even, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
I mean, this is all kind of new. I mean, I keep my camera on except for joint hearings when the entirety of the land use committee turns theirs off as well. So there you go. I'm following the elected representatives of the people in their practice and what I do during our joint hearings. Yeah, Amelia.
I'll just add as framing for this. I may be wrong, but I think we've also only had, I think that the transition from GoToWebinar to Zoom has allowed I think we've seen a transition where I don't think people could turn their cameras on GoToWebinar. Maybe Risa or someone else can confirm, but the fact that many of our applicant teams aren't in that practice I'm not sure is something that's carried through the last 3 years, but I think maybe a function of the software we were using up until like September. If that's part of your concern or begins to get at your question about like what is the norm, I think we now have new opportunities that we didn't used to. Just in case that's a point of relevance. And Marissa can correct me.
This is Raisa speaking, through you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just clarify that GoToWebinar was a completely different interface, as Madam Vice Chair said, and it did make it more difficult for people to be able to share their videos and be able to talk freely. With Zoom, you do have to make everybody into a panelist for them to be able to share their camera. If they're all attendees, they're not able to share their camera. So that's a new feature, but it's not something that wasn't available in GoToWebinar. It was just more difficult to do that through GoToWebinar. It's a lot easier to do that through Zoom.
Great. Well, so there's a couple thoughts I have about, so I was segmenting in my head, there's, I think, sort of 3 or maybe 4 categories of people who participate in our meetings. There's the planning board members, there's the planning staff, that's sort of 2 categories. There's applicant teams and everybody on their side, and then there's members of the public giving testimony. And seems like the public giving testimony, am I right that it's tough to ask members of the public to turn on their cameras? And maybe there's even privacy reasons why we almost can't do that or something. But what's behind all this is thinking there's so much that's communicated non-verbally. To the extent we can have cameras on, that's nice. Furthermore, I was realizing there's some people who testify somewhat regularly at meetings, and I could be like in line with them at the grocery store and not even know who they are, but I know their name and have been in many meetings with them. So I'd be curious to just talk through those categories quickly. Like, is member of the public we just can't do it for very good privacy reasons? And then applicant teams, like there's a couple times recently where Michael McNeely, you've raised, it'd be nice to have the cameras on. And I feel like that norm has shifted a little bit over the last couple of meetings, even because you've raised that, and just want to check that if we all think it's a good idea to ask applicant teams to turn their cameras on, maybe we can just do that a little bit more uniformly, and that would help a teeny bit. So.
No, I don't mind. I'm happy to continue this discussion once we've thought about it a little more. I just want to raise for people's consideration that members of the public also have the opportunity to testify via written submission. So it would be, I think, a little bit of a disparate treatment to have people who choose to provide oral testimony to unmute a camera, or to turn on a camera rather, and people who are submitting written testimony to kind of remain faceless. Now, obviously, when we had meetings in person, someone would stand up and come to a microphone. That would be their choice. And I know of a lot of people that intentionally elected not to make an oral presentation because they didn't want to stand in front of a body and be seen, and they were more comfortable providing their testimony in a written form. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm a little bit worried about treating different people, treating members of the public who are all kind of one body in different ways, when their option is also to submit written testimony. But we can talk about it. Yeah, Debbie.
I was gonna say maybe there's just the opportunity to announce that that's an available option for people that are from the public that are presenting, that they can not what's unmute for the camera, but they can make themselves seen and visible, but that it's not necessarily a requirement, but just so folks know it's out there.
Amelia.
This feels like it starts to tie into something I wasn't going to raise, but would just share as a reminder. In the amendments to the RPP last year, we revise the request that people provide their full address for the record to just their street of residence for the record. And if we are going to start encouraging folks, members of the public, or giving them the option to join on video, I would encourage us to be even more clear and explicit in that it's street of residence, not full address, because that to me is the intersection where it becomes more of a privacy concern or something.
That's fair. I mean, we can consider all of it. I mean, people would stand up in front of an entire board and give their name and address, and but
I would have pushed for the change to street of residence only in that instance too, just
That's
because
fine.
it's a different world than it was 20 years ago.
yeah, I mean, I can go with either way. I see, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just gonna highlight the applicant teams being on camera, that aspect of it. I, as one member, find it very much easier to engage and as Member Schuster mentioned, the mannerism, the body language, so to speak. So I'm not necessarily advocating that we should make this as a policy consideration, but it would certainly be something that should be preferred, just at least on the applicant team side. So just wanted to share that bit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Michael.
Yeah, I think I would just echo the same comments. Obviously, you've heard me positively reinforce applicants who turn on their screen over the last few meetings, and I think I'd do the same. I do think there's a delineation between an applicant and the public, but strongly support applicants turning their camera on as much as possible.
Okay, it's definitely something that we can talk about and how we want to handle it in specifically in our meetings with the land use committee and joint hearings. That is actually run by the chair of the land use committee and their policies and practices, and we are but merely guests. That I actually think it is not specifically required for us to have a joint hearing and be present at it, because all we have to do is make a recommendation. We are not the approving body for amendments to the zoning code through those joint hearings. We could technically ask for a separate presentation by presenters and proponents of amendments that we can then make our recommendations for. So it's always been my understanding that we are merely guests at the land use committee when that stuff is done, because that is their meeting and their agenda. So, what else?
I think that's good for now. The other one I have is much smaller, and I don't want to take more time. So appreciate the indulgence. Yeah.
Sure. We can bring this up at a different meeting and figure out what we want to do on that one. Because I think the other two we're at least one of them we're certainly constrained in. And the first one on how we take testimony, I think, needs a little bit of research. So, yeah, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had one clarifying question on the red lines that were provided. Raisa, for FIA 6, the modifications of parking lots. If we had a applicant who got a project with a special permit approved that was literally adjacent to a T station, and they wanted to come back and update their design and remove the parking, as we've seen in several applications, is that something that would be minor enough that it would kind of go through this staff review process, or is that major enough that that would come to this board?
This is Raisa speaking. I think the language is very specific to restriping and striping, and like if you wanted to add 1 or 2 trees. And so that's really the focus of this addition, if that helps provide clarity.
Super helpful, and I thought that was the answer. I just wanted to clarify before I voted, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else want to raise anything on the rules and policies? Okay, so we have a series of red lines that were proposed by Raisa to amend, and that that is technically what's before us now. I think do we agree, Luke, do you agree that we should hold off on discussion until we look at some of the issues and bring this up again in a future meeting?
Definitely. This is on the question of public testimony. Yeah. Yep.
Both public testimony and where we might want to go with camera requirements.
Yeah, and the reason I even set the camera stuff aside is just because I know that is just a practice anyway, so that's less of something to adopt and more just to, but if we discuss it again to get our heads in this even further in the same place on those expectations, that's great, but all sounds good.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so at least on the red lines that were presented by Risa, does anybody have any comments or revisions to those? Okay, seeing none, I move to adopt those redlined amendments to our policies and procedures. Seconded by Amelia. Risa, can you call the roll?
This is Risa speaking. Michael Capuano,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Okay, we have policies and procedures. What else we got? The
We have procedures and policies.
procedures and I'll continue to screw that up, and it'll just be so embarrassing every time.
I might have just gotten it backwards. It'll take some.
What else we have? We have the dates, the meeting dates. Right, so do you want to, let's see, Debbie. You wanna,
I'm not sure what the city's
about the date?
policy on this, but the October 3rd date is actually the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is a Jewish holiday. I don't know if the city practices not to hold public hearings on religious holidays, but I just want to point that out. And I've not checked the calendar for other holidays as well to see if there's any overlap there. So just I guess a question to the staff.
This is Risa speaking, and I'm not going to be the best person to answer this question, but essentially the administration has had many discussions on if you don't hold public hearings on one religion specific holiday, then you have to do it for all the other holidays. So that's why I don't believe that was considered into that meeting date. But if, for example, Debbie, you needed to not be at that meeting, you don't have to be. But essentially that's the discussion that we've had internally, and the administration's had discussions on, that if you do it for one religion, then you are kind of doing it for all the other religions as well, like you have to. And that's kind of where we landed. And I don't think I'm the best person to explain this. So I can definitely connect you with someone else if that's more helpful.
Okay, then that was my question, and I understand I can have my personal liberty, maybe not to attend that evening, but if there was a policy that the city was trying to do it for all religions, religious holidays, essentially to avoid public hearings. So, yeah, I mean, if you at another time, I'm curious to hear the answer on that. And Mr. Chair, I realized I never announced that I missed the December 21st hearing, but I did watch the video recordings and submitted the affidavit. Apologies,
Okay.
a bit out of order.
I don't think there was anything that came up today that would have required that attendance, with the exception of the continuance, which, as you know, only requires one member to continue an agenda item. So, anybody else have anything they would like to raise for the good of the meeting before we get into elections? Okay. Seeing none, we have 3 positions that are elected on the planning board. One is the chairman, one is the vice chairman, and one is the clerk. Those positions are restricted, as I have come to understand, I think earlier this year or late last year, to full members of the board. So it's my understanding that alternates are ineligible to hold an official position on the board. So it restricts it. But let's go with chairman. Do we have anybody who would like to make a nomination for chairman? Yes, Amelia.
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate you to continue on as chair for the coming term, in acknowledgement of your longstanding tenure on the board and demeanor in the face of more challenging cases and steady leadership.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Would anybody like to second that nomination? I see Jahan is the second for that nomination. Raisa, could I please ask you to call the roll on nomination for chairman?
This is Raisa speaking. Michael Capuano,
I abstain.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Second up, I would love and be honored to re-nominate Amelia to be the vice chair for this year. She's done an awesome job. She's a subject matter expert in a lot of I think very important things that we handle, and she's doing a fantastic job in stepping in when you needed to. I think you always bring an interesting and thoughtful perspective to what we do, and ways that the planning board can get better at what we do. So I would love to nominate you to continue as vice chair this year. Do we have a second? I see Jahan as well. I also saw Debbie in a few others. But Jahan can be the official second as well. Raisa, could you please call the roll?
This is Raisa speaking. Michael Capuano,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
I will abstain.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would also like to nominate Jahan to remain as clerk. You've done a fantastic job reading in the notices of public hearing, and also stepping up to chair on the occasion that we needed you to, and I appreciate that. You've also been a valuable member, and you always have, I think, insightful ways of looking at projects, and I would love to have you continue in that role if you'd like to take it. So I nominate Jahan to remain as, yep, Amelia, sorry.
Oh,
I see
I'm
you.
seconding. I jumped the gun. Sorry.
I've nominated you, and are you jumping in for the second? Okay. Raisa, could you please call the roll?
This is Raisa speaking. Michael Capuano,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
I will abstain.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay, we have offices. I don't think there's anything else on our agenda tonight. Let's double check. We have minutes for December. Raisa, do we have minutes that we need to approve?
This is Raisa speaking. We do have minutes from December 7, 2023 planning board
Okay.
meeting.
2023 seems like so long ago. Does anybody have any comments or questions or revisions to the December 7th, 23 meeting minutes? Okay. Seeing none, chair moves to adopt the. Oh, you okay? Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Chair. I at least did not review the December 7th meeting minutes. I may have missed an attachment, but I apologize. Do others have them?
Johan, have you seen them?
So, Mr. Chair, similar to Vice Chair, I did not see the meeting minutes either, so I'm not sure if
I think
missed
maybe Amelia, Raisa, you sent them to me at a separate email because I think I have seen them. Let's hold off then until the entirety of the board has seen the meeting minutes. Does So gonna continue that agenda item as another business. So if you can just send those around for the meeting on the 18th, I'd appreciate it. Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if we wanted to revisit the topic of a policy-focused subcommittee at all in this group tonight, or if we wanted to hold on that topic pending discussion with staff.
Yeah, so it was my understanding that you and me and Sarah Lewis and Rice are going to sit down on the practicalities of having that and how it will be staffed, when meetings would be held and things. I'm still very much in support of having a subcommittee that would do policy and code work. I think that's a great idea. I don't know how deeply I personally want to dig into it right now until we've had that discussion with Sarah Lewis and the other responsible people over at planning and zoning. But I think this is absolutely something that to the extent we can move forward on it sooner rather than later, particularly in light of some of the comments that we made in our recommendations to the Land Use Committee on the MBTA Communities Act and things that we would have liked to see in the code to not necessarily, wouldn't have been in violation of the act, but would have clarified things and made things a little bit more interesting and in line with some of our planning goals. Because I know we had looked at making some comments and some kind of color in our recommendations, that if there were ways for us to formally make recommendations, not just for that act, obviously, but things that we think can be done better in the code, that I think the planning board is certainly an appropriate body to be able to make those type of recommendations. And under the ordinance, under state law, we also have the authority to be able to make those formal recommendations that would trigger a joint hearing. So I'm still very much in support of the idea of doing something like that. And if the logistics of an actual committee don't work through, we can always add things to our agenda. And I would take those, I think in many cases, in advance of cases. This is stuff that would be more global, and I would take those items first, because those are important to talk about. So my concern is by not having a subcommittee and dealing with it on our normal agenda, it just chokes our agenda with too many items, and every meeting is going to be 14 hours long and all of that. So having a subcommittee to talk about these things, to make recommendations to the board as a whole, I think is both appropriate and a more streamlined way of doing it. So let's you and I sit down with staff when we can get our calendars aligned and bring it up after that.
Thank you very much.
But I'm on board for sure. Yes, John.
Mr. Chair, so this is just a comment for your consideration. So I really enjoyed the fact that we talked about other business today. Not that cases and hearings are important; they're certainly important. One thought that I had was, I know that our agendas, depending on the meeting, they have a lot of cases, hearings that take up a considerable amount of time. However, if we are finding ourselves in certain parts of the year where there is some space and availability for other business to be included in, I would really recommend that, and I would really appreciate that. I mean, I'm thinking of things like biohazard updates and things of pressing nature that when we're looking at laboratories and other other types of developments that may have these types of considerations, just so we can continue to move things forward, as far as our knowledge is concerned. I'm not recommending if we have like 6 or 7 cases to add other business under those instances, but maybe
under our rules and regs, if we have 7 cases, we're hearing 6.
yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. But something for you to consider as you, of course, work with the Vice Chair and also with Rice as well to include that in. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. So John, I wasn't necessarily going to bring it up tonight just because it's still kind of in the works offline, but we're also having discussions on potential ways to get updates on certain other aspects of things that we do and things that we've asked for and things that we've done. So I'd like to see where that goes and see if we can kind of rope that in with, you know, whether it's going to be periodic updates to, you know, to the board or what. But I'm looking at potentially trying to see if we can do that in a somewhat more formal way. And I'm kind of still working through how to make that happen. But no, I agree with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, I think it is 6:54, and I think we should probably go eat dinner. So, Chair moves to adjourn and reconvene on the 18th of January, seconded by Amelia. Raisa, can you please call the roll?
This is Raisa speaking. Michael Capuano,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton,
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Thank you all very much and have a nice night, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Aye.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Take care.